from liaison services that are helping us, from volunteers, from recruited assets, from technical intelligence, from wiretaps, from intercepts, from overhead. We knew that amount of money that he was getting from donations or extortion, whichever way you want to make it, and what he was doing. He was in Khartoum at the time, building roads and everything else. But what he was really doing outside the city, he had camps. We had overhead of the guys training in terrorist attacks. And we kept putting up, the proposals up the ladder, and that the administration just, no, we don't have enough evidence. We can't prove that he was bad. And there's a very renowned guy with the name of Billy Waugh. Billy Waugh was a very dear friend of mine. We met in 1990 and stayed friends for a very long time until he passed. And Billy is the first guy to do surveillance on bin Laden in the early 90s in Khartoum. So when I started the bin Laden task force, I called my buddy Billy Waugh. I said, Billy, you were there. Tell me, what's the situation? The guy was still there. I mean, he was still in Khartoum. And Billy told me, he says, Rick, he says, he's in the white. He drives himself half the time. He's got some goons with him once in a while that follow him around, but they're not they're not just killers. A special team from us, we could wipe it out. And he had this plan and we had that plan. We submitted all these different ideas of how to neutralize bin Laden. And I would say by 1997, 1998, before I left the station, we could have had him. And the impact of that, Jay said, imagine if we would have been allowed in 1997 to take down bin Laden. It's very different. It'd be like shooting Hitler before World War II. The world would have been a completely different thing. Better or worse, that's not for us to say, but we missed those opportunities. And unfortunately, Mike Shorter, of whom I used to be a very big fan of, he kind of imploded afterwards, but Mike took it very personal when we got the embassy bombings in Africa. And he got into George Tenet's face and told him, says, the blood of these people are in your hands. Well, George Tenet was a politician, but it wasn't his decision. It was the administration's decision not to do so. I think that if the administration would have approved it, he would have carried it out. So that got him sideways and pretty much ended his career. Bin Laden, of course, shortly thereafter went into Afghanistan, and once he did that, the game was over. But the beauty of it is that very same unit that we started in January of 1996 is the unit that on May 1st, I think it is, 2011, was able to get bin Laden. And everybody says, well, the SEAL team shot bin Laden. I said, yes, the SEAL team shot bin Laden. But it was that unit in CIA, that task force in CIA that finally tracked him down, pinpointed it, verified to the point that this administration agreed that it was worth going. And back to Title 50, those SEAL team guys were under they were actually detail lead to the agency because they were not doing this in Afghanistan. They were doing this in Pakistan, and that's an act of war. So that needed Title 50 authorities and the signatures of the president. And so technically, and we had guys on the ground with them, but not only was CIA the one that pinpointed and finally found them, the SEAL team that did a fantastic job, don't get me wrong, I have nothing but admiration for those guys, were under our auspices for the legalities of it.
Yeah, I remember, from different sources, right, SEALs that were there and whatnot, they were talking about their plan to like get out. What if this thing went completely sideways and Pakistan was alerted and somehow reacted before they could finish their mission and get away, right? And they were talking, okay, we have different tiers of QRF. We have one QRF that isn't that far away of a whole bunch of SEAL Team 6, like other SEAL Team 6 guys. And then if we really need it, we have an entire Ranger battalion that's ready to go, that's already spun up, to handle that whatever fight we get. And I remember hearing, in one of the briefs that Obama was in, someone said, what happens if they get captured? And Obama, at least from what I heard, right, he shook his head. He's like, my guys are not giving up, right? If they decide that they're going to try and take our guys, we're going to level that entire military base that is right there. And he told the Air Force to go figure out what they needed to actually make that happen and have that already ready to go. And I mean, I don't agree with all of Obama's policies or anything like that. I mean, if you asked me today, I probably couldn't even name one, right? But I remember at that time, I didn't really agree with everything on him, but for that, I always, like tip my hat to him because he knew, he was taking the handcuffs off, and I feel like in the agencies and in the military, the handcuffs are normally like on because you have so many highly trained pit bulls that are just like, man, if you would take me off the chain,
Open
this
the gate.
thing would be done, you know?
Open the cage. But there's another component of that too, which is something there is no station in the world, CIA station in the world that doesn't have evacuation plans and
Right.
evacuation resources. So that's the other thing that we had in Pakistan. Yes, and this is textbook. You have a very small unit here that's going to do the deed. You have the first level of QRF, which may be another 12 that can come in with heavier weapons and whatever it is, and some air support. Then you have, like you said, the 82nd Airborne ready with Rangers or whatever to jump in and just destroy everything. But we also had rat lines, in case they did have to diddy out of there, and they would be able to go to a particular place where somebody would stick them in a truck and try to smuggle them out in some way or another. So
Huh.
it is definitely a team sport.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the beautiful thing about the military and the CIA, specifically like with, ground branch, you're getting all these guys with all this different training, all these different expertise, right? All this different background. And, when you bring them to the table and say, hey, like we have this thing over here, we need you to bring it to us or destroy it or whatever it might be, the SEAL is going to approach it from a different angle than the Green Beret or different angle from the CIA, operator, right? Like whatever that looks like. And you get to go through and like really create, and design like the perfect situation. I don't want to call it the perfect situation, but you get to design your solution, right? And then you have all these tertiary plans in place where it's like, okay, well, if this happens, I'm going to go to this expert in getting people out of a country, a hostile country in a hostile situation. He's going to be there. He has his own team that's all that they do. Right. And it's just, it's fascinating to me.
But you hit on something that's a very strong point. Special Activities Division is full of soft individuals. Everybody's the operations forces, the four that we mentioned. But on top of that, they're trained case officers. They have to do tours as case officers. And as a matter of fact, we've had dozens of chiefs of station. You're looking at one of them. That was a paramilitary guy. We even had a DDO that was a paramilitary officer. The tables were changed with time, but yeah, that's the uniqueness of Special Activities. It's now a Special Activities Center. In my time, it was SAD, Special Activities Division. The fact that you have these really highly trained and specialized people, whether it's air, navy, whatever it is, but they're also case officers. And I think that was the big bump up for us was the international terrorism, because now we had to send somebody to be chief of station in a place that the average Joe ain't gonna cut it. You had to have the case officer training, but you also had to know how to defend yourself and how to get yourself out of trouble or beat the trouble.
Well, Rick, in an effort to wrap up our conversation, I feel like I'd go another 3-4 hours with you, right? But I gotta hold to my time frame. I'm sure my wife with my 2-month-old would be appreciative of that. Why don't you maybe tell us like how you got out of the agency, what you're doing now, that sort of thing. Like what drove you to the end? Because it sounds like you probably came up on like that time frame that they impose on everyone where, you're what is it? You have to, it's mandatory retirement by a certain age. So you probably
Right, but I'd retired before that. In my case, I was chief of ops at the counterterrorism center when 9/11 happened. So this was a very personal thing for me because I started the Bin Laden task force. Now I'm the chief of ops at CIA's counterterrorist center, and we get hit. I think I got the job like 4 months before when I came back from a very bad, where I was chief of station, really bad town in a radical Muslim country in East Africa. That's as far as I can go with that one.